welcome to the Courage to Talk, a relationship podcast, a space where we slow down, get honest, and explore what really happens in relationships, the conflict, the closeness, and the emotions underneath it all. Not to blame, not to fix, but to understand and connect with curiosity and courage. And now, here's your host, relationship therapist, Eduardo Cristiano Hernandez.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Courage to Talk, a relationship podcast. I'm Eduardo, a relationship therapist and your host. I'm really excited about today's conversation. If you remember the prior episodes, it has been, I think, leading to the conversation today. Today, I'm joined by Elisa Brennecke, the founder of Marra Therapy, a group practice whose mission is to make therapy a lifestyle, not the last resort. Elisa brings a powerful lived experience to the room, both as a private practice owner, as a practitioner, and as a supervisor. As a Latina immigrant born in and raised in Mexico, mother of three in an interracial marriage, a huge LGBTQ plus ally and advocate for immigrants. We've been talking in the background, and I'm really excited for this conversation and to have her here in the podcast, in the studio. Lisa, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Eduardo. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, we were talking prior to this and just super thrilled to chat with you. Thank you.
Yeah. There were so many conversations happening that our listeners, we're not gonna let them into that. But we were really okay. So we originally had a topic, and then you and I, as we were preparing leading to the episode, we were like, well, let's brainstorm. And then we came to today's topic, and we were both like, yeah, this is a conversation that is not only needed, but maybe a lot of folks, a lot of colleagues, a lot of people are not talking about it because it's really a topic. And so today we're talking about therapist attachment style and how it shows up, particularly right in the workplace, but also in the therapy space. So those are the areas that I think I would love to speak with you, especially since you bring that lens again as a private practice owner and also as a supervisor. Would you agree that this is a topic that is really not talked about?
Yeah, I think there's not enough open conversations about the topic. I think I personally wanted to talk about this because it's a lived experience, something that I am far removed. And I'm still, let's be real, I'm still working through it, but I am far removed to comfortably be vulnerable about it. I think there's some fear around revealing your attachment style and how it directly or indirectly shows up in your relationship with clients, in your relationship with your coworkers, even in the relationship of how you manage things like your schedule. Like if you are avoidant, how you may also avoid professional tasks. So I am really excited to just bring some candid conversations around this topic.
Yeah, and it was interesting when you and I were having a conversation that we were passionate about it. A bit anxious, not gonna lie. We were both like, oh, okay, we're gonna do this. But as we're talking about having courageous conversations about this, is also a relationship. It's a relationship that we'll build with others, with ourselves. We were like, yeah, let's just have the conversation. And then we'll see.
We'll see.
We're being courageous here and vulnerable. So um so with that in mind, I think there's an idea that therapists are neutral, right? That we're blank slates. From your perspective, do you think that's actually true? That therapists do not show their own attachment style, their own stuff? What do you think?
I think therapists are really self-aware. I think by training and sometimes let's think about the people that really go into the therapy profession. I know when I first started working with people out of school, the thing that I hear from folks is say, oh, I came into mental health industry because I really love helping people, or I was interested in making systemic changes. That is right off school. The more that I work with people in supervision, that narrative changes. And we are realizing that people that come into mental health is because many of them had histories of struggling themselves with mental health or family members with mental health. We all carry narratives, we all carry stories. And with that story comes an attachment, right? That has been formed, has been developed. So I do think therapists already have that awareness built in. I think it develops differently as where you are in your career. So no, I don't think we're neutral. I think we all need to recognizing your attachment style. It's not the same as separating and putting things in practice. And we can talk about what that looks like more. But to answer your question, no, I do not think that there's this neutrality that you can keep yourself in check in the room. At times that is really obvious. Yes, you may keep that attachment in check, but I think there's so many different blind spots that if you're really not attuned somatically to the shifts of energy that happen in your body, or you have not done your own work in injuries, it shows up. And I can give you specific examples.
Yeah, please.
I was working with this young woman a few years back that would really take it so personal. Like, listen, is jarring enough for a therapist when a client ghosts you? Like, it doesn't matter what your attachment style is. It's just, it doesn't feel good. But for this particular therapist, it wasn't just the fact that it was jarring. It was dysregulating.
Yeah.
Right? As we were exploring the layers of why was it so dysregulating, why was it so, I'm going to use the word devastating, she started to notice that the way that these devastations that she would feel of clients not showing up or client discontinuing services, they were the same devastation that she would feel in personal relationships. So in this case, we were able to talk about like, it wasn't really about the client leaving or ghosting her. It was that a lot of injuries were feeling fresh for her again. And as a supervisor, there's boundaries, right? Because I'm not your therapist.
Right.
We're not going to work through that in our supervisory relationship. But I think just bringing enough awareness for her to realize and connect the dots allowed her to bring that to her own therapy and realize I am bringing my attachment style to work and how it may show up in my work with clients or in the way that I take things personally.
Yeah. You're touching that one area, which is the therapy space, which includes supervision. I also think that their own attachment style will also show in how they respond to you, not only as a supervisor, but as the clinical director, the private practice owner, right? Like their own attachment style of how they receive that feedback and how they build that relationship with you. Because granted, regardless how many years of experience we might have as a therapist, if you're not able to build a relationship, which is a secure base relationship, it's just not going to work. There's going to be this thing all the time. So I'm thinking like, for your perspective, how has that shown up in your role as a clinical director, in your role as a private practice owner?
It shows up every day, whether you like it or not. And to be transparent with you, Eduardo, that's something that I'm still figuring out in the position that I am. It's not just one way. It's not just how my team's individual attachment relates to my style, but also how my attachment may respond to their style. So before I go into that, I do want to bring some clarity on this topic because I know we're really focusing it on our industry, which is private practice, mental health, whether you're a solo therapist, you're part of a team, or you're in community mental health. We're keeping it really niche and focused. But truly, this topic is so relevant to any workplace and to any person that is in a leadership position. That I always say, if you are in some sort of manager position, founder, business owner, and you have a team, you need to be in therapy because being in those positions will test you in ways that you did not know could test you. And one of them is your attachment. Like, I'll give you an example. I recently, when I say recently, not like yesterday, but in this journey of having a large team, I have learned so much about myself and my own attachment. Example, I've always known that I have an anxious attachment, like in my romantic relationships and with my friends. And I thought I was really good at separating that from my workplace. And there's like really subtle patterns that I notice that I'm not. Like, I get really activated when someone is like not communicative, like not as responsive. And you know what I'm saying? And I think it's just the work. It's not just recognizing, it's realizing like, well, I am having an anxious attachment situation happening right now, and I am not gonna personalize it because that is when we get in trouble. When we start personalizing these circumstances that are just simply work related circumstances and we make them about us. Or if someone has a more avoidant attachment style and they're really needing way more distance and more separation, like perhaps my way of communicating, which again is as an anxious attachment style, may be more responsive. Like I need more increased communication, may feel like asphyxiating. So I think it's all about, for me as a leader, it's not just knowing my team's attachment. That's not my role as a boss to know that. Like I'm not your therapist. I'm your supervisor or your boss, but my role is to really have open conversations on like, what is the best way for me to communicate with you? Because if I know what is the best way that works for you, and the best way that works for you is how you're going to optimize being here as part of a team, that's just going to help to all of us. And we're going to have this really harmonious workspace. So that's how I see it.
I appreciate you bringing this to a bigger context because, I mean, even in the podcast, we have not just therapists and clinicians to listen to the podcast, but we have people who are just interested in hearing from mental health professionals. And they themselves could be, I don't know, like engineers, lawyers, doctors, and we had those patients. And and so I think it's really important because we're not trying to label or anything like that or put him in a category, but I think that these attachment patterns show up for everyone. Like whether you're a therapist or not, they're going to show up. I mean, if they show up in your romantic relationship, trust and believe they're gonna show up in the way you interact with your peers at work, the way you interact with friends. I mean, it is a thing. And I'm like you. I'm an anxious attachment as well, and so I'm very, you know, uh, aware of it and how it shows up. But I really also appreciate how you're saying that you're very open and communicative with the people that you work with. about like, how can I help you, right? How can I support you so that we can have a relationship that goes from insecure-ish to more of a secure base? Because at the end of the day, you want to provide a workspace that feels secure, right? Like
Yes,
that's what you're
absolutely.
aiming for. And I think that also plays out into like, and you and I have talked about this outside of podcast, but like how there's this, mm, it's very isolating, I can assume for yourself as a private practice owner. Like I almost feel like you might get from all different areas of like who you are because people have different, you know what I mean? Like their own
Yep.
attachment styles. I'll give you an example. We're both part of virtual uh, Latinx mental health groups. I have seen how attachment styles show up in that virtual hub, right? And I
Uh-huh.
think that something that I see is how it can be very anxious or avoidant or
Yeah.
dismissive. So for a private practice, I think it's man, my gosh, you're taking it off. How do you manage it? Jesus.
Um, I think the way that at least within my team, that knowing where you stand, like I think a lot of people may label me as very direct, but I'd rather be direct than indirect and you not know where you stand. Because to me, that's kind. You knowing where you stand with me at all times is a way for me to let you know that I'm seeing you, right? Like my job as a leader is not to manage your emotions, but I can also be respectful that you may perhaps knowing that you may be a bit more anxious than another person. I can be really mindful of that. And I will tailor the way that I communicate and perhaps give you more context or give you more heads up. Like, hey, heads up, this email is going to come out. And, but I think it's, to me, it's all like whether you are anxious, avoidant, disorganized, or secure, the key to me is open communication, because that is what's going to lead us to a secure attachment, at least in the workplace. Like I said, sometimes awareness is not enough. How do we put that awareness into practice? And what I say may not change the fact that perhaps you're going to disagree with me. What I say or do, perhaps it's not going to change the fact that you are not going to like me. But that's not my job to make you like me or to make you agree with me. My job is to create a really safe work environment, psychologically safe. And that just means full transparency. So that is the way that it shows up. I will tell you, Eduardo, that I think in my position, you're right to say it is very lonely, because as much as I like to talk about these things, and I'm someone who is passionate and I carry my emotions on my sleeve, like I cannot hide. Like if I'm upset, you're going to know, and I cannot pretend that I'm okay. Um, it's hard because you will be scrutinized, and everything that you do or say will kind of like be put under a microscope and say, well, she was doing this. That's why she's doing this. So I think because I don't want people to fill in the gaps with their own perceptions or their own narratives. That is where I come in, and I try to say, get ahead of it. Here's my story. This is what happened. Because sometimes it's easier. I think we believe that as leaders, especially with someone like myself that has an anxious attachment. And, with anxious attachment, one of the main things of how it shows up is perceptions. Like you are so worried about perceptions. I've had to work through that as a leader and really heal my own attachment to make it secure, because needing to be courageous and have conversations that really showed who I am. And to be honest with you, that's been really healing. in transforming insecurities, like a anxious attachment style, to more secure.
No, it makes a lot of sense because, and it's also interesting for neighbors, right? Like we're in the same, I think there's like, I don't know, 100 clinicians in that building, not gonna
Yeah.
lie. But the only time that we see each other, it's always when we have those in between breaks. But I
In the
have never,
bathroom.
yeah, in the bathroom, like, hey, gotta go, but I have never experienced you as like what you're describing, if that makes sense. What you call is direct and being very transparent. But I have never experienced you as like, I don't know, I almost feel like the way that it's coming across that someone else may think as like direct as in like, I don't want to use the word aggressive because that's horrible, but no, more
Or
like,
just
ándale, hostil. ¿Cómo se dice hostil en inglés?
hostile,
Like hostile. Yeah, right. And I don't
spicy.
experience. Yeah, and maybe it's because you're not my boss. Maybe that's. But even if you were my boss, I think like I'm also very direct, and I think that can rub people the wrong way. But I just don't see it. Maybe because we're both.
You know what, though? That's interesting that you say that, because something that I notice in anxious attachment is that, yes, there's a misconception a little bit. Like, I, in the past, and maybe it's not a misconception, it's a trajectory of development. Like, I think because of our own need to have more reassurance and to have more, like, I know, example, like with my partner, like I'm the person that is like, I need to have over communication is better for me than minimum communication, which sometimes can come off as micromanaging. Okay. But I think I have learned to ask for what I need, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to it's going to like put me into a loop again, because my anxious attachment style, which I'm currently working on healing. It's not that I have recognized I have this and I am okay with it. Like, my hope is to continue creating micro practices, like, example, asking what I'm needing from the get go, so I can create this space of slow healing towards more secure, right?
Yeah.
So it may not be like direct in a way that is like more aggressive and hostile. I think they're just like, I just know what I want. And I am not afraid to ask for what I want, and not from a place of selfishness. I think it's from a place of self-preservation, because I have learned that when I don't, the cost of coming back to regulation is too high. So even example, like when I have learned the hard way. I can give you a clear example of how that shows up in group practice. Like, they were, as you know, we're relatively new. Like, we're 4 to 5 years old as a group, and we have rapidly been growing.
Yeah.
But with growth, I cannot lead the team with 6 people the same way that I lead a team of 18. So there's been so many changes in the 4 years that perhaps was a lot for some people to feel. And I think what happened in the past, that is like having an anxious attachment style and abandonment injuries, I would not say things that I needed out of a place of fear of like, they're going to leave, they're going to quit. And I think that the emotional backlash for me later on was so enormous that I just made a promise to myself that even if conversations were hard and I was having an immediate sense of rupture of a fear, which is a young fear of like people are gonna leave. That was better for me than like enduring the long-term ramifications that were actually making my anxious attachment style even more activated. So yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. I can see how starting with a smaller practice of like 4 to 5 clinicians evolving to a team of 16, 18. My gosh, I've seen some they have like 100. God bless their soul. I don't even know how they do it. Um, uh, it's like it requires change. And as we know, change for certain attachment styles, it's like taking the carpet under their feet and it's just, just very dysregulated, which it's part of a lot of attachment styles. You need to learn how to, or at least be aware of how to regulate those emotions. And I think that definitely there has to be change. And that comes with, um, I would assume, losing some and gaining some, right? When we think about like how the team
absolutely.
is, probably comes the backslash, right? Like, oh, I wasn't taken care of. Because, I mean,
Well, this profession, I think, is like, again, two things like being an owner this is a therapist owned practice. Like we're not owned by a large corporation, ran by business people. So it is an advantage and a disadvantage, right? Because sometimes me having the gift of knowing what I know about therapy and knowing what I know about myself, sometimes I see it as a gift. And to be honest with you, sometimes I see it as a disservice because as we're talking about the attachment style and how we lead, like sometimes I'm going to be so blunt with you. I wish I was just more like, you know what? I don't care. I'm here to do business. It's not my job to know how people are feeling this or not. But the reality is that I do care. And I'm going to tell you why I care. Because long term, I want a team of people that are not just like, I don't want people's headshots on my website. I want a real team, a community. And if I, as a leader, do not take these things into consideration, which I think sometimes I wish I didn't, because I'm like, this is so much, like it's so much weight to like know that I know how everyone's feeling and perceiving and caring, right? I know ultimately it's for the best. And I think the best leaders that I know, even in other industries outside of mental health, do have that emotional intelligence to know that. I think where I need to be careful is that when we're having conversations, I can be really aware of my attachment style, my team's attachment style, the way that what they're needing, how they're responding to things. But at the end of the day, this is a place of business.
yeah. Even the way that you're talking about how your practice has evolved and from a smaller team to a bigger team, it's also healing for you, right? Like, because you learn to be leaning more secure, like standing up for yourself, being more flexible in a way, more emotionally present as
It's a
well. Like it's
spectrum.
each. Okay.
Like I think there's some days that you're like, I feel like we're flowing, like am
Mhm.
Mrs. Secure attachment style, and something happens and you regress in ways that you thought you had healed. So I
Mhm.
really like when it comes to attachment, I don't think there's a way that you're like, I am this. I think it is a spectrum. You can go through
Oh
different
yeah.
stages and regress. But I think the most interesting thing for me throughout this process is that I've been able to really see that there's no way you can keep the two separate. Like it becomes really obvious when I have interpersonal things in my life, and then there's ways that are gently reenacting at work in like almost same ways, but with a mask. And I'm like, there's just, yes, because that's what, like, it just comes full circle. And for me to ignore it just would be a disservice. So this is like really fun too. to kind of see it all.
I mean, what we know about attachment is too that they shift. People who are anxious become dismissive. People who are dismissive become more anxious, and they shift. I think, yeah, you're right. It's a spectrum. I also want to clarify. I like the way that I see what is very like well-grounded clinician. I think it's obviously our education, like the education that we get from grad school. Great supervision, like really good supervision. I even think that after we complete the licensure, I will suggest you still seek supervision, like or consultation of some sort, etc. Like I think that's so important because we all have biases.
Yeah.
And third is your own work. I think those three are, and so if that's not there, I think, girl, you in trouble, girl. Like, like
Yes,
quoting,
like, girl, what are you doing in this field?
would you agree? Those three elements of
Yes, those three are really important. Like,
yeah.
because if I am interviewing someone and I'm actively wanting to bring someone new to our team, if they have not had any ongoing, like presently going or past experiences of doing their own work, that's a red flag to me. Particularly because this job is so experiential. Like, you also need to be, what is it like to be a client? And yes, not every, I mean, as you know, I'm a therapy consumer. I've been a therapy consumer for a really long time. And I'm not always working an attachment in what I bring to the therapy space. But being in the therapy space has also helped me to have self-awareness. And the self-awareness is what leads me to then identify if something feels off. And if it's something feels off, why is that? And perhaps it's something attachment related, like we've talked about, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
do
smiling
agree with
because
you.
you're smiling and I'm smiling. I'm like, where is this going? Like, I'm like, did we touch on something important here? Like, what's going on? But no, yeah, I agree. I agree. So I
Something that
think,
we did not, I'm so sorry. I'm like cutting
no,
you off
please.
here. Something that I think I would like to go back and touch on is we were talking about like attachments being a spectrum and how you can go from one to another and just depending on context, like who you're with. Like, it's not just like you are boxed in a certain category, right? And I think for me, I'm a highly sensitive person. So something that I have noticed is that my attachment style will change depending on certain people's energy. Well, maybe, yeah. Oh my gosh. It's literally an anxious attachment style. Like, if you give me bad vibes, I'm probably going to become more anxious. But it is, at least in the workplace, just having awareness of, I may not, I don't want people to like label themselves as like this or that. Is like also
Oh, yeah.
realizing that you may be responding a certain way because certain people's energy is activating something within you, and it may not be particularly related to your attachment style. I think that is data for you to critically just gather without leading to conclusions and say, this shift of energy in my body when I'm in front of this person is leading me to reflect on something, right? It's a boundary being crossed. Am I not communicating my needs? Are my needs not being heard? Perhaps, or even just, this could even happen in like the client therapist relationship, like those shifts of energy within you, right? A client that is very non-committal and like not responsive. Is it that I am having a really young part of me being awakened? But I think that is a different topic for a different time, but just wanted to bring that up.
No, that's important. And I think that I am noticing that we are sort of like staying within the anxious attachment. And I do agree with you. It's not a label. It's not a label. It's
Can you
more like a,
tell I'm that?
I mean, we are that, right? But let, how about avoidant attachment? In your perspective as a
Mhm.
private practice owner, as a supervisor, how does an attachment avoidant might show up or has shown up for you?
I know I not always know when someone's avoidant. I think to me, my experience with avoidant attachment in the workplace, but also in like personal relationships, it is that they're really good at camouflaging. Like they may show up in the beginning as just like more serious or distant. But I think for me as a supervisor is I start kind of seeing what may seem as disinterest or disengagement, apathy is just a simple fear. And I'll give you an example of like in the supervision relationship, I like to name things that are happening in the space as they're happening. So that if you, Eduardo, are working under my supervision and you have an anxious attachment, I will say, hey, there's something that there's a pattern that I've been noticing that I would like to name. And again, my job is not to be your therapist. I am being your supervisor, but bringing that awareness to the the supervisory relationship. I also most likely, if you are showing up these patterns here, I want you to pay attention how they may be showing up in your relationships with clients.
Yeah. And that is also where I can see the avoidant style come in, because are they, do they go into intellectualizing? Do they go into like not really being open about processing what you're saying to them? Like, hey, this is happening. Like their own stuff will start coming up even in that relationship when you're giving that feedback. And probably you have seen this, right? Like where their avoidant
Yep.
comes up. And I agree, that one is the harder one to spot, avoidant, I feel.
It's a harder one. And I also like something that I would be curious about is when you have an avoidant attachment style, you have a limited capacity to receive. You have a limited capacity for conflict. You have a limited capacity for distress tolerance. So as a therapist, really paying attention to that, because then digging are you with a client? How are you reacting to the client's distress? How are you reacting to the client's pain? How are you reacting? Are you getting curious enough to go in deeper? Or the minute that you're noticing a shift of energy in the therapeutic space because a client's highly distressed, is dysregulated, you're shutting down and you're actually there, but you're really not allowing healing for the client because so how that even reenacts unintentionally in the therapeutic space. And example, like therapists that I feel like do not keep clients long term. When I mean long term retention, it's like they've had clients, it's like a revolving door, like 3, 4 months, and it's very like solution focused. And I think when I read the intake, when I read the history, I'm like, there's so much meat here. Yet we never really got to that. And the response was like the client did not want to go to that. And I think I like to reverse it and challenge because at this point I have a relationship. Okay. It's not like I just started supervising someone. We do have a relationship and I've kind of gotten to know how they react. And it's like, it sounds like maybe there's a blockage here that was stopping you from going deeper, to stay with it, to getting more curious about things, which at the end of the day, I mean, we need to remember like our clients don't know any better. They think therapy is what we're presenting to them for some of
Yeah.
them that have not had any other point of reference. And if you're not really getting a hold of your own attachment, that can unintentionally create someone's therapeutic experience as a very superficial one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for many patients, clients, this probably is their introduction to therapy. Like this is their first time in therapy, and they may get the wrong impression, right? And or just discourage them from ever seeking therapy again. So
Or to be like, oh, that was it. Like, it was fine. Like,
yeah. And two
blah.
years later, they get into a relationship and they're back in the space, which is fine, listeners. That's fine.
Uh-huh.
But it's a spectrum, as you said, right?
But
Yeah.
if a
How
therapist
about
does not even know that, like, they're carrying that unhealed attachment style, right? Or maybe they're aware, but they're not doing anything to kind of heal and be aware and work towards it, then it's just fruitless.
yeah? How about when there's more of a disorganized attachment? What have you noticed in your role?
I have
You're
not seen
smiling.
that yet. We
You're
only
like,
hire secure. Not just kidding.
yeah.
That would be a really fun and interesting.
Mm.
That's how we know we're therapists, when I'm like, that would be really fun. I don't know. I don't know. You know what? I have a lot of thoughts, not so nice ones about it. But I think I'm just thinking as an employer lens, and also relationally, perhaps how dangerous it can be to a therapeutic relationship.
Mhm.
I think as a supervisors, you are also gatekeepers of this industry. We do have a ethical responsibility to make sure that the people that we supervise are following the highest code of ethics. And
Yeah.
I do think I could see some problematic things happening with someone who has a disorganized attachment
Yeah.
style. Um, so I don't
Yeah.
know. I think at that point, if I had one, there would be a lot more interventions.
As we were talking about a spectrum, you might have someone who is more dismissive and then something happens and they shift more disorganized. And then what do you do? I mean, there are protocols for what you do, right? But like like what you do as an owner, as a supervisor, to try to like, hey, this is happening. I think this is what you were talking about earlier, about like bringing that awareness. Like, I noticed this shift. How can I support you? How can we support you? And giving opportunities for change to happen, to shift them more secure-ish. And if it doesn't happen, well, decisions have to be made.
Yeah. But you brought up a
Mhm.
really interesting point, because at the end of the day, I think we need to remember that in workplaces, you're going to have a variety of people from all different walks of life, different spectrums, different trauma histories, right? And the bigger that you get, the more you are prone to have that pool of candidates have different people come into your company. And I think it's something that, in order to protect that, like the integrity of the client, the integrity of the company, like we have guardrails. So yes, I can talk about this in a therapeutic supervision relationship, but I think that's why process and procedures are put in place. Because as much as you can have a disorganized attachment style, or someone who has a trauma history and can really become easily dysregulated and can shift into something else, like you can always go back to your process and procedures and say, hey, this is the process and procedure. When we are here in this workplace, this is the guidelines that we have for you to stay in line. And I think that not only protects the client, it protects the therapist,
Yeah.
because they know what they need to do. They know how they need to, their guardrails, and protects the company. So
Yeah.
I think it's not like we are always going to have so many different personalities. And I think that's why I always say with practice, like as you're growing, really making sure that you have clear language on your employee manual on what are the expectations for this, what are the expectations for that, because you know what? Manuals don't lie. And if something happens, you can always refer to that and say, hey, it's here. This is how this is the process. This is what we need to do. And then that's it, you know?
Yeah. And I think this is the part where the misconception may come in for a lot of uh for clinicians who are struggling to say like, oh, they're being too rigid or too hostile. I mean, at the end of the day, procedures are in place to protect you, definitely protect your client. And at the end of the day, it's a business to protect the business. But I can see how easily that can be perceived by others. It was about me. It was something about me when it's really not personal. It's just quote in RuPaul's Drag Race. It's not personal. It's just drag, like, do you watch RuPaul's? Okay. Many other listeners sound like, what the heck is he talking about? Uh, but
Love me
yeah,
some RuPaul.
right. Okay. So for colleagues listening, this part of the podcast might be very important. What should they be paying attention to?
Wow, that's a deep one. Because we could take this in so many different directions.
Mhm.
If I was working with a client with attachment, the thing that I would tell them to really pay attention is patterns, okay, uh, of reenactment. Not all
Mm,
reenactments are going to be the same and so obvious. Uh, but if you're noticing that there's something that is a trigger, I think I would really love for you to like pay attention. Is there a pattern of recreation on I am reenacting the way that I would feel when I was a young child and my mom would leave for many hours to work and I felt like no one cared about me.
mhm.
I think that just sometimes people don't like when I bring back historical things about childhood or about certain experiences. But the truth is that in order to do healing, you do need to pay attention to reenactment. And if you're
Yeah.
paying attention to reenactment of if you're working on really improving your attachment style and you're noticing like I feel really triggered when my husband does not take the trash out, is it really the trash or am I really reenacting exactly like the way that I used to feel when my parents never paid attention to me? Because I feel like it's not taking the trash out. You just don't I don't feel like you care about what is important to me, right? So
Yeah.
really, really taking looking at patterns and reenactments, bringing that to the therapeutic space if you are in therapy and
Hmm.
working through that because I think there's such a powerful thing to go back and really bring in that young part of you to make sure that it's feeling you're building that relationship and it's letting her know that it's okay. I see you. I love you. I am right here with you. And more importantly, being able to have that language to explain to the partner, I wasn't mad that you keep forgetting to take the trash out every day. I feel that when you don't take the trash out, it reminds me of not feeling or feeling like my needs were never cared for.
Yeah.
And that changes the narrative. I'm not
Yeah.
having a trash conversation with my partner in a fight. I'm having a really meaningful healing conversation.
Yeah. I think for clients should be paying attention, which I think I always go back to relationships, is am I feeling something from my therapist? Can I share it to my therapist? And can my therapist receive it? If I cannot share it, or I can share it, but then my therapist cannot receive it, those are red flags.
Yeah.
I think,
Wow.
can I share it with my therapist? Because then you are building a relationship. But then, okay, I can share this with my therapist. I can share this with Eduardo. Does he even say sorry? Does he make repair attempts? Does he process it? Or he just says, well, maybe this is more about your own stuff coming up. That's very dismissive. That's very avoidant. So I think that's what I will give to our listeners, whether you're a client or where you were thinking about becoming a client, or even just not clients, anyone out there that is in a different career.
That
I
is so
will.
powerful. Wow. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Before we know it, time is passed by. We can talk about this so long. Any final thoughts about these topics? Anything you want? Oh, I'm going to get some hit for this. What should therapists be paying attention?
You love to just put me on the spot, don't you? Well, I think I'm
I'll
gonna
say
be.
my own.
Well, I wanna see. I'm gonna be a copycat because I think what you said is just of such importance. And again, therapy is a two-way street. And it is the same, right? Like if my client is not able to, I'm not going to put my issues to my client. Of course, that's unethical and inappropriate. But if just noticing how my client reacts to things, and if they're shutting down, if they're able to receive, I think that also is data for you to know areas that we may need to work through in the future, or perhaps not work through in the future because that's not what they came to see us or the kind of work that they are hoping to do. But at the end of the day, everything comes full circle, and you having that little piece of information can also help you to tailor ways of creating more safety for that client. And naming, like, I noticed a part that came up for me that you got really quiet. I wonder what that meant for you. Like, if I said something, did that make you feel unsafe, or did it awaken something for you?
Yeah, and that's takes so much courage from the therapist to be that vulnerable. And again, it can also be very healing for themselves. And because I don't want to put Elisa on the spot, I'm going to put myself on the spot now. And I'm going to say that I agree. For my fellow colleagues, colegas, I'm going to say that just a lot of awareness. And if there's a part of you that feels something right now about anything that we talk about today, just be curious, be aware, and lean into it. Because if we don't, then we're not only not doing justice to our clients, but we're not doing justice to our inner child. Because obviously there's something there, right? Even as you listen to this podcast. Yes, we have the great cafecito.
I got chills. I got the chills as you said that. Okay.
So, any final thoughts, comments?
Final thoughts was that I love this conversation. I think we could be talking about this for hours and hours at a time, like, because it really opens up into so many different topics, like the inner child work, professionalism, therapy, client relationships. So I think I'm just living with a lot of gratitude that we got to have this space to talk about this, but also gratitude that I felt that I could just show up here and be authentic. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I really love that both clinicians and non-clinicians and just our listeners to get to know the other side of you. that it's not only a practice owner, but also a clinician and also a human. Because sometimes that one of those or a lot of those may not show up because it's just one-sided. You only get to see one thing. So I really appreciate you being very courageous. And I know you were anxious. I know I was anxious because you are Elisa Brennecke. You're a practice owner, and I hold a lot of respect for the peers that came before me and lead the way and have done this for many more years than myself. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Hey, listener. In this episode, Elisa and I explore how attachment styles can show up not only in our personal relationships, but also in professional spaces like therapy, supervision, leadership, and workplace dynamics. We talked about how anxious, avoidant, and shifting attachment patterns can influence not only the way they communicate, but also how we set boundaries, how we regulate ourselves, and the ways that we relate to others, not just clients, but also colleagues and to ourselves. Elisa shared honest insight from her experience, not only as a clinician, but also as a supervisor and a private practice owner. And together, we highlighted how self awareness, repair, and curiosity can really help us move towards more secure relationships in every area of our lives. I want to especially thank Elisa Brennecke for joining me in the studio and for really opening up and having an honest and meaningful conversation. I'm deeply grateful for her vulnerability, her wisdom, and her willingness to share both her professional and personal experiences with all of us. And to you, our listeners, our viewers, thank you for listening to the Courage to Talk, a relationship podcast. My name is Eduardo. I'm a relationship therapist, and I'll see you next time. The Courage to Talk, a relationship podcast, is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to replace professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The discussions and personal stories shared by guests and hosts are based on individual experiences and should not be considered a substitute for consulting with a licensed mental health professional. Hey, before we wrap up, I know that listening to any podcast can bring up a lot of things inside of us. And if you're feeling like you might need some additional support, just know you don't have to go through it alone. If you want to talk to someone but don't know where to start, you can call or text 988 in the US for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or the National Alliance of Mental Illness at 1-800-950-NAMI. That is 1-800-950-6264. Thanks for listening, and just remember, you matter.